call the meeting of the school committee to order at 7:04. First thing we'll do is raise to do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next order of business is citizens' concerns. Are there any citizens here who have anything that they want to present to the school committee tonight? Okay. See no one rising or nodding their head. Adjustments to the agenda. We do not have any adjustments to the agenda tonight. For the chair's report, as you can see, Susan Burgess-Cox standing in for Chair Fiore, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. As Chair Fiore does, I'm just going to name a few upcoming events that are happening in the schools. This Thursday, February 8th, at the Chenery Middle School, there's an honors concert at 7 o'clock. On February 12th, at the high school, there's a spring concert at 7 o'clock. It's also the similar concert is going to be on the 28th as well at the high school. On February 14th, there's an art show at the middle school. On February 15th, the Chenery Middle School Symphonies and Parent-Teacher Chorus Concert is at 7 o'clock. I just want to note that Belmont's very fortunate to have a community that strongly supports music and the arts, and we appreciate all of the teachers, administrators, community members, and parents that continue to make concerts like this and events like this possible. On March 17th, the Foundation for Belmont Education is having their silver anniversary fundraiser. The foundation's been in existence now for 25 years, and it's celebrating the 25 years of making a difference here in the town of Belmont and with the Belmont Public Schools. Tickets for that event are available online. It's again on March 17th from 7 to 10:30 at Belmont Hill School. On March 28th at the Butler School at 7 o'clock, the Belmont Special Education Parent Advisory Council is hosting a resource fair for families. And the purpose of the fair is to allow community members to explore a variety of options and resources that are available for students beyond those that are available at the school. There are over 20 vendors that have agreed to participate in groups that provide occupational therapy, physical therapy, behavioral services, speech therapy, advocacy, tutoring. So there'll be a whole host of people, and we hope that families will come out to that event. And that's all I have.
Great, thank you. We have just some news to report. At our last meeting that was held at the Wellington School, the school committee voted to have the Belmont High School building project be a 7 through 12 school. That's a significant decision on behalf of the town, so we're thankful that that decision has been made as we move forward to support the building program, but also support our schools K-12, because it involves a lot of moving parts over the next 3 to 4 years to ensure that our configurations work and our new schools work for our children. So we look forward to that work over the next few years with our teachers and our community members. I would like to let folks know that we've been having a lot of conversation about our after-school programs at the elementary level and at the Chenery. And I have met with the vendors of those programs on several occasions, and a small group of parents and I met as well before the winter recess. And I'm going to be asking the school committee policy committee to talk about some of the assumptions that we're making as we talk about the role of the school department and the school committee as it relates to after-school programming. So when we meet with our vendors and our providers, we can let them know what the parameters are of our role and the work that they do with our children, and also have clarity with some of the parents that may have concerns, and maybe have them have some discussion about that as well. So we look forward to the discussion at the policy committee and sharing some information with our parents, and then ultimately with our vendors as well. In addition to that policy committee meeting, I am requesting that we talk about the issue of start times with the school committee at policy committee. We have a group of teachers and administrators at the high school who will look at the high school issue of if they start later, what would that look like as a transitionary option before we go into our new configuration of 7 through 12. That group has a first meeting of Monday of next week to look at options internally to our 9 through 12 setting only. Originally, we looked at our K-12 environment, but we realized that we didn't want to disrupt all of our other 5 schools worth of parents and children, and we wanted to just look at the high school. So we look forward to those options being explored by our teachers and administrators, as well as discussing how that work will work into the school committee's conversation and ultimately decision if any of these options are feasible over the next few years. I want to let our parents and our staff know that we are keeping an eye on the flu. We're not Big Brother, but we know when you're out, and we're kind of collecting that data because we want to make sure that there's no bugs or flus or viruses running through our buildings. I want to thank our nursing staff for keeping an eye on it. And every day I get a list of how many students are out and how many staff are out to make sure that we don't have any illnesses that are brewing in our buildings that we may want to take further action on. And there's a lot of good news around all of our athletic teams that finished up in the fall and that are working really hard this winter. But I have to say that the boys varsity swim and dive team went 7-0. They won the Middlesex League. They had a huge match last week. And sometimes certain sports don't get elevated to that level of discussion or folks being able to attend. The meet was actually during the school day. So congratulations to that hard-working group of boy swimmers and to all of our athletes. But they haven't won the league in a long time, so I wanted to give a little plug. So congratulations to those students. And I think it's Coach Sidaway is his last name. He's a pretty guy. So that's my update.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we have no unfinished business, and then before we move into major business, we want to introduce our new town administrator.
Yes, so we'd like to introduce Patrice Garvin to come to the table and sit next to Kate. Patrice, we welcome you to Belmont and the Belmont School Committee meetings.
Thank you.
We have had you on board for almost a month now. It feels like 3 days and 3 years all at the same time. But thank you for offering to come to the table and meet the school committee and meet our parents through our school committee meetings, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for the shout out to the swim team. My son is on the high school swim team in Chelmsford, so I can say it's been fun cheering him on, and so thanks for that. I know it's a sport that doesn't really get the focus that, a lot of great kids, so just wanted to say that. I wanted to say thank you, thanks to the school committee. What I think most about with school committees, especially the schools, as a parent, I'm interacting with the schools every day, and sometimes you don't even realize how much you're interacting on a daily basis through the emails and the phone calls, and the support of a strong school committee is really important. So I definitely wanted to come here and show my support and let you know if there's anything you need. Week 4, I think I'm finally getting a chance to sit down with John because it's just been so crazy. So I just met the assistant today. So it just kind of shows you how a little busy I've been. But no, I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to getting to know the community even more. And so far, everything I've seen has been phenomenal. So.
Well, I'd like to thank you. We haven't met to sit down and talk about the relationships of the town and the schools and how we work and some of the context of that, but we have met at least 5 or 6 times regarding budget and facilities and just the day-to-day work that we've been doing together over time. So it's been great to sit down and work some of those things through, and we look forward to meeting tomorrow. And I encourage all of our school committee members to access Patrice. Every time you call, she picks up the phone. I don't think there's someone in between that. There's her on the phone that picks up, and she's, what do you need? And so it's that easy for our folks at home and for the folks here to take part. So I appreciate your access and look forward to tomorrow as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to commend you and let everybody know about the grant that you got within your first month here. And we had the lieutenant governor fortunately come to Belmont to celebrate that town getting that grant. That you worked very hard in your first week, I believe, to get that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, it was great. It's actually going to be an opportunity for the town to really kind of bring together their financial policies and to do some long-term financial planning. So hopefully it'll be a good tool moving forward, especially considering a lot of the capital projects that are going on. So thank you.
Does anyone have any
Thank you.
Okay. So an item that we skipped over, the student representatives report. It's my understanding we do have students here to give us a report.
You have a big group of students here.
Hi everyone, my name is James Kitch, and we just wanted to give a brief overview of some things that are going on at the high school. There's a lot going on, and so we wanted to fill you in on that.
So just to start off, you might already know we had Diversity Week just last week, and we had a couple presentations, a couple speakers come in talking on a variety of subjects. And what would happen is our teachers would pull us out and go down to the auditorium, and there would be a presentation, then question and answer shortly after that.
We had a variety of presenters, including a psychic, a graphic novelist, the GSA club at our school had a panel, and many more. And overall, the feedback was very positive. It was a really, really good way to get students involved in the community and hear diverse and new perspectives.
We're getting formal feedback on what students think of this shortly, and we think we'll have another one in April.
Okay, and with winter sports, as Superintendent John Phelan said, swimming went 7-0, and other sports are also doing pretty well, but obviously not as great as swimming. So, for example, a team I'm a part of, track, on Saturday we are going to the Grand Prix, so you can catch us on TV. So we're going to be racing against professional athletes. And just last Saturday, we had the International Economic Summit, where it was a global simulation of trade and economic principles.
Yeah, so the International Economic Summit consisted of schools in the area, as well as 2 schools from Beijing. So we were partnered with some Chinese students, and we worked together to complete economics quizzes as well as a training session, and we also created posters and costumes and competed against other teams to try to place the prize.
Yeah, full disclosure to everyone, Camilla's team was one of the teams that won the summit, so congratulations to her. Also going on at the high school, the Belmont High School Orchestra is having kind of a residency with the Handel and Haydn Society. The Handel and Haydn Society is it's a kind of an orchestra that focuses on a professional orchestra that focuses on traditional Baroque performance, and is based in Boston. And so there are 3 different opportunities that the orchestra students at the high school were able to experience. So about a week ago, there was an opportunity to go see a Handel and Haydn performance at Symphony Hall, where they played some Handel music, and they played a Bach piece, I think. And I actually was not able to go, but I heard some really cool feedback from the people that were there. They said, wow, it was just so cool to see the kind of instruments that they were using, how together they were. And on Monday, the concertmaster of Handel and Haydn, Aislinn Noski, and another member of the orchestra, they're coming to Belmont High School, and they're working with the orchestra for 2 hours to teach them about Baroque style of music that we're going to be playing at our upcoming concert that I think was mentioned on February 12th. And also, next Thursday, the orchestra, some members of the orchestra, including myself, we're going to be going to a dress rehearsal of Handel and Haydn at Jordan Hall to kind of see what's like when they rehearse and see another example of traditional performance. So, lots of cool stuff is going on.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to let the public know, and the school committee and the students before they go, that we do have the Diversity Week advisors coming to our school committee meeting on March 13th to talk all about the Diversity Week as well. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you for your participation tonight.
Thank you. So now moving on to major business, we have Ardo S. Dorian coming to present to us on a performing arts trip.
Right here.
Good.
Sit at the table.
I know, this is nice. This is,
You know, we have some spaces
I like it.
available. We
Yeah.
can be a little cozy.
so I'm here to talk about a proposal for a trip for the Belmont High School Chorus. This would be April 2019, which sounds like forever away, but it's not that far away. April 2019 to Ireland. This would be over April vacation week.
Can we just note that it's Exhibit A from our school committee?
Thank you.
packet?
Thank you. So it's we've taken trips like this pretty routinely over the past couple of decades anyway. Every 2 years we'll alternate. So 1 year a chorus will go, the next year it'll be band and orchestra. So this year, for example, the high school marching band and jazz ensemble are heading to Disney World to perform and do a parade and a performance there over February break. So that's the band trip this year. So next year would be a chorus year to travel. This would be an 8-day trip that includes two travel days on either end. So it's, I believe it's 6 full days in Ireland. And the itinerary, the sort of general itinerary that you have in Exhibit A is given to us from World Cultural Tours, which is the tour company that we have used almost exclusively for our music travel over the last, again, couple of decades, just because they've been so great to work with and so reliable. So you can take a look at that itinerary. So this is a generalized itinerary of the Ireland trip that World Cultural Tours offers. So some of the details, for example, it says day 3 is a recital day in Galway. That might change depending on when the performance venues are available. But the choruses will perform at least 2 times over the course of the trip and have the opportunity to hear some music and, of course, visit museums. And there's one potential trip out to the Ring of Kerry, which I believe is what it's called, the Ring of Kerry, which is like the mountainous region of Ireland. So it should be a really outstanding trip. The cost is high, as all these trips are, based on if we get 50 paying passengers, I believe, for quad occupancy, what did we say it was? I forget exactly what it is. It's on the front. Sorry. Yes, between about $2,700 and $2,900, and that includes airfare, hotel, bus transportation, breakfast every day, dinner most days, all admissions to museums, performance venues. We'll have a tour guide, professional tour guide with us the entire trip. So the way these trips work is we take a coach bus to Logan Airport. There's a representative from World Cultural Tours that meets us there, gets us all checked in, sends us off on the plane. When we land at our destination, there's someone there on site to meet us and also be our tour guide for the entire duration of the trip. So it's a really great way for school groups, I feel like, to take kids out to see parts of the world together. I think that's a big piece of this, is that you know, we were fortunate to live in a community where a lot of kids travel and they take family trips abroad and things like that, but there is something different and special about doing it with 60 of your music friends and going off and performing together, and feeling like professional musicians on the road a little bit, packing your uniforms and music and all that stuff. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. We're trying our best to keep costs down, to allow as many families to participate as possible. That is difficult given the high cost of airfare and things like that. There are fundraising opportunities that World Cultural Tours can guide us through that may provide an opportunity for students to raise some of the funds. Although I will say, you know, when the cost of the trip is $2,700, that's a lot of fundraising that a family has to do to make a sizable dent in it. So for our part, really what we're trying to do is give families as much notice as possible about the trip so that they can start to tuck away a little bit of cash here and there. So if we give them at least a year's warning that we're going to take this trip, that it can take some of the sting out of the cost and hopefully allow as many kids to participate as possible.
So that's why Arto wanted to come to school committee now in February. Typically, these trips, the deadline for bringing them to school committee is May for international trips for the following school year. And also typically we present the information to you at one school committee meeting and then ask for you to vote on it at the subsequent school committee meeting.
And this is not to muddy the waters, but you may actually see us start to come to you with trips even further in advance. So don't be surprised if we come to you later this year with a 2020 trip for band and orchestra, because I do feel like if you can give a family a year and a half or 2 years to put $100 away in a savings account, or for a kid to save their babysitting money or whatever it is, I think that will go a long way to helping families.
Great.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Artie.
Okay, thank you.
Questions?
So I mean, are you going to have a chance to, explore traditional Irish music? Is that part of your trip?
It should be, yes. I mean, so there are, I think there was one on here.
I mean,
I forget
Ireland
what
has
it
a
was.
fine choral tradition.
Yes. Yeah, so I mean, the last trip we took abroad to was to Spain. And there were some really great opportunities for those students to, one of the performances was in a conservatory. Actually, two of the performances were in a conservatory, so we heard they were about college-age music students performing Spanish band music, actually, believe it or not. There's a really rich tradition of band music in Spain. And then the tour company does a really nice job of, first of all, they've got to find a restaurant that can host 80 high school kids, right? So they'll find a place that can host that number of people and also will have some live music for the kids to hear. So there's a lot of music making, a lot of music hearing. It's not just music, though. It's museums and artwork and architecture and really taking in everything that the location has to offer.
Thank you, Archie.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
And just to note, we would vote on this at our next
At
meeting.
the February
correct?
27th meeting,
Yes.
correct.
So next on the agenda is a community education report from Marcia Stanley. And this is Exhibit B in our packet.
I'd like to welcome Marcia, and we have other folks that participated in the work as well. We're thankful to all those groups that participated in this work, and thankful for Marcia for leading it and for Janice for supporting it as well. And we look forward to your report, so thank you very much and welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's so nice to see so many of the folks who worked on this over the, gosh, it's been a little while now since we had our first meeting in June of 2017, so it's really lovely to see you all here tonight. So I'm here tonight, as Superintendent Phelan said, to present the work and recommendations of the Community Education Steering Committee that was convened back in the spring of 2017. It was convened to review the current community education program in Belmont and assess the feasibility of expanding community education options for the future. And I'm very grateful to Marshall Samuels, who's sitting here next to me. She contacted me last spring to offer her considerable expertise in strategic planning and project management in order for us to be able to do this program review and analysis. I can tell you with complete certainty that we would not have had the capacity to do this work without Marcia. So we are here because Marcia offered her services and then followed through and did amazing work, which you will see tonight. So I'm going to explain the process we followed, then Marcia will explain the details of what we learned from the market analysis and of programs in peer communities, and then with our recommendations. But I sort of like to start with the end in mind. So I'm going to tell, there's no mystery here of where we're going to end. We believe that we are not currently adequately meeting the needs for education and enrichment with the current community education program, and we believe that there's unmet need and demand, and also untapped potential here in Belmont for programs. And second, we believe that to meet our goal of providing those education and enrichment options, we do need a full-time director of community education. Ultimately, we believe that community education can be self-sustaining, but we'll need initial funding to hire a director to do the work to make it so. We also know that this money is not available in the school department budget, so again, punchline first, we will be seeking approval to appoint an advisory committee and take some next steps to seek how can we do this, how can we find some outside funding to be able to get that initial start up for a director salary. So as I said, we started off, Marcia and I talking last April, after meeting with her and hearing all the possibilities and gratefully accepting her offer to guide this work, we convened the steering committee. In addition to the community education program, adult education classes are offered through quite a variety of venues here in Belmont. And these include our Belmont Summer Enrichment Program, the Belmont Recreation Division, the Council on Aging, the Media Center, the Public Library, the Powers Music School, just to name a few. So when we were convening the steering committee, we sought steering committee members from these various organizations and the community at large to get really a wide range of perspectives on the current program and its future possibilities. So I added in this slide, which isn't in your handout, it was on the table, but it is in your full community report that you have. These are the members who worked with us. Many of them are here today. Elizabeth Dustin is here. Thank you, Elizabeth. Lisa Fiore, who's not able to be here tonight, but was also on the committee. Kelly Higgins is here. Thanks for being here, Kelly. And June Howell from Recreation is here. And let's see, Marjorie Miller is here from Professor Emeritus from Lesley University, and also Peter, Director of the Library, Peter Struzziero.
Peter is good.
Peter is here, and of course, Marcia. So we had a really great group of committed people committed to the work of providing education to adults in our community, and very grateful for the time and expertise that you brought. So, back to the process just for a minute. So we met for our first meeting in June of 2017. During that time, we took some time to get to know each other a little bit and the various programs that are offered, as I said, here in town, to learn more about what's the internal capacity in Belmont, and also to determine the scope of the external market analysis. Throughout the late spring and summer, Marcia and some of the steering committee members conducted interviews, collected data about these programs in peer communities. And then we reconvened on October 4th, the steering committee. We met and reviewed to discuss and analyze the findings. We developed some initial ideas of conclusions and what we thought was the direction we wanted to bring to you. And then a smaller subcommittee met a few times to draft a report. So that's the process. And now I'm going to ask Marcia to take it from here and talk a little bit about what we learned and our recommendations.
Thanks, Janice, and thanks everybody for being here. And I see people from the Superintendent's Advisory Council also that works to advise you on community education. So thanks everybody. This couldn't have been done without so many people contributing. So we decided to look at 8 communities to see what they did in community education, and we chose peer communities and communities that are geographically close to Belmont. You've seen, I won't repeat what's the communities because it's in the package. We developed a questionnaire of 20 different questions to ask each director. So I had extended phone conversations with all 8 directors, some of which are under the school department, some of which are under recreation. We, at the end of, and all the detailed information about that is available. At the end of that survey, we took that information and reviewed the other communities to see how they compared with Belmont. All of the communities have a full-time director. They all have at least a full-time director. They all have additional staff as well. The staffing depends on all the components. Quite a number of these programs have extended day programs and school vacation programs in them, and so in those cases the staffing is larger. They all have pretty extensive marketing campaigns. You've probably seen these around town. I got started on this actually by picking these things up around town. So this is the kind of brochure they have. They're pretty flashy, and they are distributed. You can pick them up in almost any business in town. So they distribute these brochures heavily in Belmont, I should say, and surrounding towns. They have Facebook pages. Some of them have Twitter accounts. They all spend quite a bit of time marketing to not only within their community, but to other communities. All of these programs break even. They are, by charter, self-sustaining. Some of them contribute fairly significant sums back to the school department. Lexington, I think it's around $150,000 that goes back to reimburse for overhead of using the buildings. Another town was about $180,000, but none of them cost the school department any money. They all at least break even. One of the questions on the 20 questions was, anybody else remember 20 questions? One of the questions is, what is your biggest challenge? And we are not alone, and the biggest challenge is space. Everybody's got crowded schools, especially the suburbs that are closer into Boston, and they all struggle with where to put the programs as the programs expand, but they've been creative, as have we, even with our very small program. And traditionally, in most of the other towns, the bread and butter is the extended day program, because as in Belmont, there is an increasing demand for after-school and vacation programs. So those end up being the programs that bring in a steady source of revenue. The adult programs also break even, but they are, a lot of the success is choosing the right programs and figuring out how to draw people in.
Excellent.
Yes. So what do we do in Belmont to make this, to duplicate what's happened in other towns? Well, you have to look at what we don't have, which is a full-time director. We have Kelly right now, who gets paid a stipend of $3,800 to do this, as I think some people on the committee said this is sort of a bake sale mentality is the way we're running this right now. So it's pretty hard to put together a curriculum with 80 to 100 courses, which they have in other towns, with someone who's getting paid a stipend and a group of steering committee members who are doing this in their spare time. This is a business, and you just can't run it with volunteers. We have to invest in marketing. I showed you that you're probably familiar with what we have. This is what we have in Belmont to advertise our community education programs, and I showed you what you have in other towns. Every other town has something like this. And it's not only that they're attractive on the outside, but the graphics on the inside, and I know they've enticed me. I started out by taking courses in a number of these places, so you have to invest in that kind of marketing. And by the way, the national organizations on community education say that you cannot do this online. You just can't get the people, especially if you're going to enter the market late like we would be doing. You have to be able to spend something on a hard copy. And you have to distribute it. You have to send it to all your residents, and you have to distribute it to other communities. We have to exploit the expertise we have in Belmont. We have a lot of faculty here. I'll tell you one thing that I asked all of these communities is, do you have any trouble recruiting faculty? And they said, never. They said, there are people coming in the door every day volunteering their service. And I think we're in a better position than a lot of other towns because we have so many people who work at nearby universities. We have a lot of other entities in town or nearby that we can collaborate with. Just in our committee meetings, we had a couple of those kinds of organizations, and it was wonderful. They were very interested in seeing what they could do to forge public-private partnerships. We have places like Arsenal Center for the Arts and Mine Auburn Hospital close by. These are the kinds of organizations that the communities partner with to offer courses. And we need to think, right now we're focused, except for a couple of college prep, SAT prep classes, everything that we're doing in Belmont is focused on adults. But there is a demand for all ages and stages that we're not meeting right now. Next slide.
So that brings us back to where we started, which is, we think that there is a demand. We think there is a market that people would benefit from and appreciate, not having to travel to other towns for the kinds of courses that we think we can offer. But we know that within the capacity, the current capacity of the staffing, that's a challenge. So that's where we are, and Marcia and I met with Superintendent Phelan and discussed this, and knew that we needed to also come here to the school committee and share with you this report and answer any questions you might have, and then then consider our next steps.
Does anyone have questions?
So I was sort of interested to see that for other communities, you know, their chief moneymaker are they after-school programs?
Some of them are.
Some of them are. So how would this fit in with the big discussion that we've been having about after-school space and after-school programs? Would this be something that you know, some students might want to do once a week, say, you know, take a course rather than going to basic, or another after-school thing, or what?
So in my work with the vendors that provide our after-school care, we identified very quickly that there are different communities who do after-school care differently. One option for that is that the school system actually runs the after-school care, and they're staffed by school employees who are just after-school employees, not full-time teachers. Sometimes teachers or teacher assistants do volunteer, not volunteer, but take part and get paid to work at those programs. And they're run by like Belmont Public School staff. That way it brings more consistency, maybe higher quality programming, in one-stop shopping for the community. When they register for kindergarten, they can register for after-school care. So there is some value to that. I think the harder parts of that is that when you think about all the staff that you see at the Wellington after-school program or the Burbank after-school program, we would be increasing our employee base by a significant number. And so we would have to weigh how we would introduce that into the district if we chose to go down that option. But we did talk about that option with our vendors, and they do know that that's something that's on the horizon potentially that's being discussed, which would quite frankly put all of those folks out of business, the individual groups that we have now. So that has been a discussion that we have, and districts do it that way. And there is, to Marcia's point, usually follows a good amount of funds that are revenue positive for the district when you do it well.
But I should say this proposal is for adults only. We're starting out thinking about what we can do for adults.
Okay.
And also,
I mean, do you think that just purely aiming at adults, you would be able to make it self-sustaining?
Yes, and Lexington, which is one of the most successful programs, they do not have the extended day programs with them. They have a 5-week summer program, and they're one of the most successful, and they're the one I mentioned that they're able to return some money.
So
to the
I was
town.
just a bit concerned that you were thinking about relying on funding for after school.
No, and so I'm sorry that wasn't clear. That slide speaks to things that we noticed when we did our review of other programs. But our first ask and our first thought is, okay, in order to even consider, well, what might it look like in Belmont? We need a full-time person to do that. So then how do we go and seek that funding? So not that we would go start a program to get the funding, but that is there some
No, I understand that
opportunity?
part. It's
Right.
just that, you know, I guess I was just wondering if it would have to have an after-school component to be self-sustaining.
Not necessarily, no. And we do have actually a very successful 4-week summer program run by Katie Kelly and Pete Tosick. Katie was a member of the steering committee. So there's potential for there, and there's potential for lots of partnerships. And there's potential in terms of marketing for streamlining the opportunities for our Belmont community, because right now, you know, there are programs at Belmont Media Center, there are programs at Council on Aging, there are programs at the library. If I don't sort of know where to go for all of these things, wouldn't it be great if we could do one-stop shopping and have under one umbrella all of those different opportunities that exist as well? But that's the kind of thing that, you know, if we can hire a full-time director, ideally someone who works in one of those really successful programs now as an assistant who knows all of those things, that could come and build up our program. And I believe some of the people that you spoke with, Marcia, talked about how, you know, you need probably 1 year to get it to a place where it can be sustaining. So we need some way to kickstart this for 1 year and then hire get someone to come in and help us think about these things that it's not for lack of wanting to do it that all of the folks who've been part of this work up till now, it's not that people haven't wanted to do it, but within all of the other things that people do, or given the fact that for right now the director is a stipended position and not a full-time job, it's not really feasible to expect that you could do the kind of planning and program development that needs to happen. But thank you for asking that question to clarify, because there may have been other folks confused.
And I should maybe add that most of these programs in the towns did not start out having an extended day program. They're very much like Belmont, where the extended day programs occurred organically. Later, as these programs became more mature, they began to incorporate more in the town. Arlington, for example, still has some of their extended day programs in their schools, and some of them are under the umbrella of community education. So it's not necessary to have everything together. One other thing I forgot to add is that Watertown does not have much in the way of community education. As a matter of fact, after the survey, all the staff left in the summer. And there is no program at all, or no courses at all in the fall. Waltham has very little. One of the things I know at the B Street Center that the Council on Aging that they're seeing is a huge demand for ESL. So we have a lot, according to the census, we have 29% of the households in Belmont have some people don't speak English at home. That's certainly true in Waltham and Watertown. So this is, ESL is another way that could be a sort of a bread and butter for Belmont, because it's something that we could offer that is really not that available in surrounding towns.
Do you know what happened in Watertown as to why?
We had nothing to do with it.
I'm sure that is true.
No, we don't really know.
So, first of all, thank you to Marcia and Janice, but thank you to Kathy, Grant, and Kelly, who actually worked really hard within the small parameters that they have to produce courses and produce opportunities for the community that we have with limited options and limited space and limited marketing and limited funding, et cetera. And it should be noted that Peter at our library in June in our Park and Rec department offered great stuff for our children and our parents, for non-school age children at the library during the day, the pool and the field house and summer programming for June in Park and Rec, and just coordinating that would be a huge gift to the community for all of us to be coordinated. But then actually having someone responsible for that and gluing it together and then producing more opportunities for our community would be great. So there are good things that go on in pockets throughout the community, and I wanted to recognize those departments and those folks as well.
There was a really nice sense of collaboration on this committee. Some people had not even met each other before, and there was a real excitement about working together. And I can tell you that from talking to people in other towns, that isn't true in other towns. So it's an advantage we have of having talented people who run interesting programs who really want to collaborate.
So it sounds like, well, so first of all, thank you for all the work, and it's great to see so many folks engaged in revitalizing the program. It sounds like there's a year of sort of startup costs that are sort of required. You know, assuming that there's not a lot of extra money in the budget right now, and certainly these days there's not, could that year of initial organizational work be driven by a sort of Herculean effort by volunteers who wanted to sort of jumpstart it? Like, is there a way that we could get through sort of a semester or 2 semesters in a volunteer-driven way that creates the funding to then make the full-time hire? Or is that just is it just too hard to cobble together?
I really don't think that. I think you need a person for whom this is his or her job, in a paid position. I don't think. I think we have seen wonderful things through the volunteers that do this work, and it's not to get to that level that we're talking about and that we're hoping for. I really feel that we need to see if we can find funding, and not within the town or school budget. Is that possible? I don't know, but I think that's the next step. So that would be to go and when I asked Marcia, is that something you could help lead? And she said yes. I said, okay, let's go to school committee and bring this idea. We might come back to you and say, we couldn't make it work. There's no pot at the end of the rainbow that we could find. But if we don't try, and then we know we won't succeed if we don't try.
And are there grants typically available for this, or is that part of what we need to figure out?
It's part of what we need to figure out. I will say that Arlington and Lexington have very successful programs. They got those programs by taking people from the Brookline program, which is the oldest and largest in the state. They were assistant directors in Brookline. They became directors in Arlington and Lexington. And you really need someone who knows this field.
Right.
Knows how to do it, but in a year they were able to make it work.
Hi, my name's Diane. I'm on the council with Kelly for the last couple of years. So I've had the privilege of working with Kelly and see.
Come to the microphone so that we can.
People can't hear you on
For the
TV. You
media
don't talk
yes.
at the microphone. That's all.
You have to excuse me if I start coughing. I have a bad cold.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I have been working with Kelly over the last couple of years, and our meetings are very, very energetic. I think there's definitely a need in our community and a desire. We had a movie day recently that went very well. We had one of the Chinese restaurants donate their food. We had the cinema donate their time. So the community is very eager to work with us. I think Kelly is on a lot of different committees, knows a lot of people. And if we're looking to hire somebody, she would be the perfect person to get us started on this, if she's interested in doing that. And I know we're willing to volunteer more time to work with her to make this happen, and I think we can.
Thank you, Diane.
Okay, thank you.
So just, if I may,
Yes.
Chair, Kelly and the group has created a partnership with Belmont Savings Bank, which I think has been fantastic and fruitful. And we have always benefited by other partnerships that we have in town. So is the group looking for the school committee's approval to act on behalf of this body to seek funding or funding partners or public-private partnerships or creative options to find the funding to put this position in place for at least 1 year to see if we can move it forward?
Yes.
Is that the ask? Okay, so that's on the table for the school committee to approve. It's not we can take a vote, or you can think about it, we can vote at next meeting, but there's no real action other than asking the continued support of the volunteers that are doing this work for the town and for the schools.
One of the things that we did at the beginning is talk to some businesses. This is going in the direction of can we find some funding about their interest in this, in expanding the program and their interest in possibly supporting the program by actually having classes in the businesses. And they were very excited about that. After the Women's Club, the open house at the Women's Club, they saw an uptick in business. One of the things we thought about is how much businesses have been hurt in Cushing Square and Belmont Center because of the construction. And this is a way of bringing people into town at night and eating in the restaurant, shopping in the stores, and so on. So there may be, I don't know whether businesses would support us, but I think we would certainly be endorsed by business and going forward, which might help us gain funding from other places.
I'm just gonna, in your report, you noted about the rec department commission, and they're wanting to hire a director, and part of their director would, I think, oversee their programs. And it looked like too in the report, it would be between the two departments possibly as to who would share, whether this would be shared or whether it would be, can you speak to that a little bit? Is that what
So we didn't get to the point of the report to saying one way or the other. For now, what we're asking is, given that it's under the school department at this point in time, to see if we can find, funding is going down, to then maybe at some future time, see how those two groups can work together. But at this point in time, it's just, if we want to, right now it's February, if we're looking for, well, what can we do that could be in place for next fall? Now's really the time to think about, well, how could we find funding to be able to get this up and running for the fall?
Okay. Thank you. Great. Well, thank you all for all of your work on this and the extensive report we got.
So do we need a motion to authorize the volunteer?
I would think that that would be helpful, so we can explicitly let the group know that they have our permission to take the further steps to explore funding and options moving forward.
I'm still unclear of what the funding is funding exactly.
So it's my understanding that the funding would provide a full-time employee to begin to do the work of creating partnerships, creating a class, a menu of courses for our adult community, interfacing with Park and Rec and the library and the school department for space and different types of programming that are already offered, and partnering with those folks at the Belmont, at our senior center with Belmont Media, and someone that could bring those groups together to not only begin new programming, but actually take advantage of and access all the collaborative programming that we have to advertise, market, and create opportunities for our community. So that person would be in charge of connecting with all the existing folks, starting enhancing what Kelly does already at a level that's full-time, and hopefully seeing the revenue come in from those programming opportunities that could then ultimately justify the pay of that person and have it be self-sustaining moving forward.
And then continue to look at the different recommendations in that report moving forward, but starting with just that.
And just so I'm clear, it says here there isn't a mission statement or a set of bylaws.
So that would be part of the work of bringing a director on, yeah.
Okay. So it's really, grant funding for the position, but nothing for the marketing, the materials, where's that money coming in?
Well,
I'm just sort of wondering how.
So a lot, those are really great questions, and the first step is there even grant funding available to do this? But asking for, if we're gonna go out and be asking folks and seeking this funding, we wanna make sure that we have the permission of the school committee to do so. And that before any other steps are taken, we would be coming back and reporting to you what we find.
Mm-hmm.
So, does anyone have a motion?
I would make a motion, get the language, I guess, exactly right, but a motion in support of continuing the work that Assistant Superintendent Darius and the committee, the volunteer group has done to explore funding opportunities in support of revitalizing the Belmont Community Education Program.
We have a second? Any discussion?
I will note, just to clarify, with the caveat that we're not at this point committing any funding for it, and anything that would be a partnership or a program you would bring back for review and discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I understand, it's to explore the funding, but not necessarily to apply? Or are we having you come back and say, here's what we
found.
have the funding, and
here's what we
the
found.
plan
It's
going
very
forward?
hard to give you those answers, because I don't even know what exists.
Yeah. Okay, just so I understand the question.
Yeah.
Clearly, thank you.
But if someone drops by my office with $100,000, I'll accept it, okay?
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone.
Patty.
So next on the agenda is the vote on the 2018-19 Belmont High School Program of Studies. This is Exhibit C.
Yes, you have in your packets the presentation from that night that lists the new courses that were in the program of studies. They include Introduction to Robotics, 3D Art 1, Digital Art 1, and Animation 1.
I would just like to add, Chair, that these are all budget neutral additions to the program of studies. and we appreciate the hard work. This proposal was done early at one of our school committee meetings prior to a big presentation that had to do with the new building project. So I don't think we gave proper attention to Liz Baker, our science director, Ardo Asadorian, our visual performing arts director, for being really creative with the courses that they're offering, listening to the teachers, listening to what the students want, and in creating courses that reflect that desire to learn new and different things and expand their departments. Other courses that have happened in the past from our social studies department director, Deb McDevitt. So we've had a history of each year, each department has brought forward budget neutral creative options for our students. So we thank all of our directors and the high school administration for being creative and also being budget neutral, because that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. And at our last meeting, we had the presentation on this. We might have had a few questions and some discussion, but if people have looked over it and want to have further discussion, this would be the time. And looking over the material, yes.
So I guess not necessarily a question, just a note of it's nice to see some of the innovative programs, particularly at least 2, maybe 3, embrace sort of elements of technology and STEM, which is, I know, something that we've talked about wanting to try to promote more and more in the curriculum. And I know it's hard when we can't necessarily hire the incremental teachers to do some of that, so it's nice that we can repurpose some of the existing faculty and innovate in the curriculum a bit to capture some of that. So it's good to see.
It's interesting, as part of the submission to the MSBA, they ask you, when we're asking for innovative space in our new school, they ask, well, are you already doing these types of programs? So part of this process a few years ago was introducing coding. Now we're introducing robotics. We have an after-school robotics club. We're now doing 3D art and giving students different opportunities. But when we were asking for these spaces, it's nice to be able to say that we've already piloted and have programs in place that we would like to expand when it comes to having new and creative space to do so. So this is exciting, and we're glad that we're taking very good steps towards great new programming in a new school over the course of the next few years.
Anyone have any other comments or questions? Okay. So, do we have a motion to approve the 2018-2019 Belmont High School Program of Studies? Andrea, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
So next on the agenda is the Belmont Public Schools 2018-2019 calendar presentation, Exhibit D.
So this is another agenda item that we're not asking you to vote tonight. We're asking you to vote at our February 27th school committee meeting. This calendar follows the new start date policy with Labor Day on September 3rd. The start date is the Wednesday after Labor Day. Everything else that's on the calendar follows the patterns that we have in the current year calendar in terms of release days and timing, with one exception. We have, for the past couple of years, had an early release day for professional development for all staff, in either late September or this year was on October 4th. And this calendar moves that day back to the first day of school as per the Unit A contract. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes.
So just to say that clearly, that means the first day of school is a half day for students.
Correct. Yes.
So that Wednesday
That Wednesday.
is a half day.
Yes.
And on the back of the calendar is a list of religious holidays. I did actually meet with the Belmont Religious Council a couple of weeks ago, and I had shared this with them and asked if they had any other input or feedback. And we're always welcome feedback or suggestions from the community as well. And our goal in sharing the religious holidays on the calendar is particularly for our teachers and staff to know. So if a student says, I'm going to be out to observe a particular holiday, the teacher has a list to understand a little bit more about what the student is talking about. And as with any absence, the expectation is the teacher will accommodate and support the student and his or her family to observe their holiday.
Yes.
John, go ahead.
Has there been any additional feedback from students, parents, faculty about the lack of religious holidays? Does that seem to be working?
It seems to be working. I did check in with the principals actually, because I wanted to get their input before I went to go see the religious council, and they said that they have not had any negative feedback. Perhaps one or two examples of some communication that could be a little bit better between students and teachers, or teachers and families. But for the most part, really, it seems to be working just as we intended and hoped.
Good.
Yes.
I'm glad that we root this list of dates and holidays in the Anti-Defamation League calendar, so we try to root it in something that's an agency and a group that does that work as their main mission. And I thank Janice Darius for meeting with the Belmont Religious Council on several occasions at night to get their feedback on this, and to share what goes on in the schools, and also share this calendar and the work that we do, and especially as it relates to how we're trying to be respectful to all of our different constituencies and groups that that make up our community. And it was nice to know that when they reviewed this, they felt like this was work that was worth continuing, and it's always good to have that partnership for this process as well. So thank you, Janice.
Any other questions, or? I just wanted to note that this is consistent now with the policy that we've established and moving forward, and we've had discussions about the calendar for the last few years, and now we have one, and it seems to be working well, which is good.
Okay.
So, and we're not voting on this tonight, correct?
No.
We're just going to
And if, as you think about it leading up to the next meeting, if you have questions, of course, feel free to let me know, or we can discuss them at the next meeting as well. Thank you.
So next, oh, so next on the agenda is the human resources update. It's Mary Peterson.
So we'd like to welcome Mary Peterson, our Director of Human Resources, to the table. Mary, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
We asked Mary to come and report out on two major issues that we're working on within the district. One is a diversity fair that we're hosting through Mary's work at the high school. And the second topic is that we have two principal search committees that we would like to announce and update the public on, and update the school committee on. So welcome, Mary.
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. And since I don't come very often to give an update on HR, since a lot of HR is something you can't really update people on, I thought I'd just take a quick minute to give you a couple of quick highlights before I get to those two main events that Superintendent Phelan just referenced. First thing, you'll know that on Monday, if you come into the central office, you'll notice a fresh face. We have a new HR assistant starting on Monday, Consuelo Abasquieta. I'm sure I didn't say that properly, but close. We're very excited to welcome her. Artemis Tingos, who has worked as the HR assistant for 10 years, is moving over to support Assistant Superintendent Darius as her assistant retired. So we're happy for Artemis with her change, and we're happy to welcome Consuelo. So say hello when you come in and introduce yourselves. We're always working on wellness initiatives and trying to think of things that we can do. We do have, right now, we have a trainer who comes in once a week and does an exercise class, sort of a boot camp style class with the staff after school on Wednesdays. That's kind of exciting. We're looking to do more of that. We're just coming up on our as you know, we're wrapping up collective bargaining, which has been a long process, and we're coming up on what will be our busy time of hiring. which will start off, I'm a part of a group called the Greater, this is the longest name of an organization ever, but it's the Greater Boston School Human Resource Network. It's a group of about 15 HR directors that I was invited to join when I first came to Belmont. And the purpose, well, we meet once a month and sort of go over the highlights of what's going on in HR in everybody's districts. Our main focus, the originating focus of this group, was to increase the diversity of the staff in our districts. And so we do host it once a year, a diversity job fair specifically marketed to and organized for teachers of color. And this year, for the first time, actually, we've been asked to host it in Belmont. So I'm very excited. We're hosting that on March 17th at the Wellington Elementary School. I think it fits really well with our strategic plan and all of the things we're working on this year. This is something we've been working on. I think we've been having conversations and sort of working on this the whole time I've been here, but we're excited to host the diversity fair this year. And so looking forward to that. We market this to, the organization markets this to all of the historically black colleges, all the ed prep programs in the area. So amazingly, we get quite a few people coming from out of state. And we have made a few hires out of this diversity fair over the years. So we'll be looking for more of that this year. And that's early in the hiring season, which is good. Our problem is there just are not enough educators, so we're all working to hire the same people. So, but that's exciting. I don't know if anyone has questions on any of that. Okay. Which brings me to the hiring season. You know, as you know, with the override, we've had the really strong advantage to be able to hire early, which has been really great for the district and very beneficial, that when you can go out with your firm budget and you can start hiring by mid-April into June, you really are hiring kind of a lot of the stronger educators, right? And so I've been really fortunate and as an HR person to be able to do that, and certainly as the district. So hopefully the budget will work itself out that we'll be able to continue to do that. Then one of the big activities for this spring is we are, as you know, conducting 2 principal searches. And I'm going to pass out to you. I didn't put this in your packets because it really is very much in draft form. But just so you can, I'm going to let you pass those down so you can have an idea. When we do, you know, some of you have been part of these searches in the past. When we search for a principal, we put together a screening committee that represents various constituencies. So there will be the BEA, the Belmont Education Association, will put forward 1 or 2 people, usually 2 people for the committee. We'll have somebody from the parent community, usually from the PTO. We have usually another principal on the committee, a director. I sit on the committee. And so the screening, that's the group that does the screening and goes through all the people who've applied, do all the first rounds of interviews, sometimes a second round of interviews, and then recommend. The job of the screening committee is to recommend finalists for the superintendent's consideration. Usually it's 2, sometimes 3, but usually 2 finalists that will come through. When we get to that, so we go through the screening committee, goes to the superintendent. When it gets to the superintendent, there's various points where everybody has an opportunity to meet them. There's a day where the person comes in the district. It's a very intense day if you're the person doing the interviewing. You meet with the staff of the building that in this case, the Wellington Elementary School, for example. So you meet with the staff right after school. Then you come up to central office and you meet with leadership council, the assistant superintendent, the superintendent, and then have a little break. And then in the evening, we invite the parent community. And I think uniquely, we have a feedback form. It's the same feedback form we use for all of those groups. I do it in different colored paper so we can tell which group is giving which set of feedback. And we really do, I think Superintendent Fellin can attest, we really do. I read them all, and you read them all, and really go through the feedback from each group. So it's it's a transparent process. It's a very inclusive process. I think everybody's voice gets heard, who wants to be heard. If they make themselves known, there's definitely opportunities to make yourself known and your voice heard. So we've posted the Wellington principal job, and we will post the high school job very shortly. Questions?
How does this process compare to your peers that you're, in terms of timing and being competitive? I know the budget is a big factor to be solid and know you can put the offer out there and hire those folks.
Right.
But in
so
terms of this process, how does it compare with?
We compare, it's a pretty comparable process. I think most districts run a similar process. Maybe not every district has a night for the parents to come out, I'm not sure about that, but I think most districts run a pretty similar process. You know, you want the principal to when you hire a principal, you want the community to feel like they had some input, at least that they were able to have that person come in front of them and hear more about them. So I think it's a pretty similar. I think the timeline, we're pretty similar. It depends on when you know somebody's going to leave. If somebody's retiring and you know in September, you might start that search a little sooner, but I think really January, February is a pretty good time frame. If we really hope to wrap these up and be able to announce a finalist for the Wellington before the April break and for the high school just after the April break, assuming all goes as planned. Yes.
And I know you know the answer to this question, but it was something that was a question to me. And these principals would start on what date?
Yes, so the principals start on July 1st is when they start their contractual year. And just, so then they have some time to get into the district and get acclimated and all of that before school in September. So we're looking for a July 1 start date. And as far as the principal goes, in terms of the budget, we know we have to hire a principal. We don't know if we have enough money in the budget to hire more teachers for X building, but we know we have to hire a principal. So that will move on now. Yeah. Tom, did you have a...
Yeah, what's the market like right now in this area for hiring principals? Is it a particularly tight market, or what's the...
You know, we've had a good response in the recent past when we've gone out for principal searches. Certainly when we went out on the middle school search was our last one. I feel like we had a pretty good response. We had a pretty good pool. So I'm looking forward to having, I mean, we're a very strong district. We're a high-performing district. We're close to the city, which is a draw for some people, but we're easily accessed to Route 2 and 128. So we're kind of a nice location for a lot of people, I think. The combination of just where we're located in proximity to the city and getting out of the city, and also just that we're a strong district. We have a strong supportive school committee. We've got a strong foundation for Belmont education supports the district. If I was somebody looking for a principalship and I poked around on the Belmont Public Schools website, I would see a lot of really positive things happening. So I think that's a real big draw for people. So I don't expect to have any concerns about a deeper pool. You know, it's a bit interesting in the world of education, unlike, you know, the rest of the world in terms of hiring. It's a very public process, so you have to, if you want an experienced principal, they have to tell their district that they're looking. So that always throws a little bit of a wrench into it. But I think for the most part, we're a pretty strong district. Yeah.
I do have colleagues that work over at Harvard, so I am invited, as I am every year, to interview and go through mock interviews with all the graduates from the Harvard School of Ed administrative program, and we have had some of those interns here in our school, so I will be there next Thursday, so I will use that opportunity to not only size up some of the candidates and go through the mock interview process, but also make some notes of folks that might be high flyers. And I actually received an email today from an entrepreneurial candidate who was over at the Harvard School, and my name must have been brought up over there because he said, oh, so-and-so brought up your name and you might be at Harvard next Thursday. I'd like to meet with you to talk about the Wellington. So I said, oh, that's an ambitious young man, person. So that's another way to network. And to Mary's comment about our work in the diversity fair, we realized that networking is a big piece of drawing really diverse candidates and high quality candidates. It's not just advertising anymore. It's reaching out with diversity fairs, having them in your buildings, and making those connections at the local colleges. So we'll be reaching at all those options to try to attract the best and the brightest to these two positions.
Right, and we do look at, we're looking at, there's lots of different sort of job boards now that there didn't used to be, so we're looking at all kinds of ways to promote the positions as well, to draw in the most candidates. And the diversity fair, every year I talk to a number of people at that diversity fair who are looking for administrative positions, so we'll definitely be looking at that when we go to that fair. And there's some other things we go to as well, so, yeah.
Sorry, one more, forgive me. And the vision is that this hire would then roll into the principal for the Belmont 7 to 12 high school, correct? Or is that?
that the administrative model for the 7th through school has yet to be
Yet to be
determined.
determined, okay.
But that will be a conversation that will be very explicit with the candidate, that model has been chosen by the district, that's something that will be worked out over the next 3 to 4 years as we prepare for entering into that new configuration.
And I suspect that when we get this position, the high school position posted, if you think about if you were a candidate looking for a job and you were looking at our site, you would see all the stuff about the building project. So I think that we will attract people who are interested in that sort of work of a new school and a new configuration. And I think, people self-select to these pools. They don't just randomly apply. Well, some people randomly apply, I suppose. But for the most part, people are going to look at this and poke around a little bit and say, gee, this looks like, someone's going to be really drawn to this and very excited about that project and where they may or may not fit into it. So I think that'll be a piece that will, any good candidate's going to look at any good candidate's going to look at the website and figure some things out about us. Yeah.
And I'll just say the last 2 principals you hired, it was great to have the community come out and see the interest of people and the questions they had, and to be able to meet and interact with the potential candidates. I think people really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you. I think people do appreciate that, and I think they appreciate being able to offer feedback on those forms. And like I said, we really value those feedback forms, and we really value that people take the time to stay and fill those out. And if I put a plug into the viewing audience, is when we have these dates announced and there is the principal search, if you can come out for both of the dates is awesome, because then you see both of the finalists as opposed to only one and not the other.
So I'd like to thank Mary for being here, and one of the important pieces is to talk to the viewing audience that if you're not a Wellington parent, you might not know that there's a Wellington position open. So we want to make sure all of our parents know that we have 2 principalships that are looking to be filled. And if you're not a high school parent or a Wellington parent, you might not know that this is happening in our district. So we have a very, very plugged-in community that knows folks, so please recommend folks to come to the Belmont schools, and we just want to make sure that we're clear and explicit with what the 2 positions are that are open, and that there's a search committee process that's transparent and will be beginning soon, and we'll keep people posted as we work through the process. So Mary, thank you very much.
Right, and just to piggyback on that, when we have solid timelines and dates, I will put that out on all the district listservs. And so that will go out to all the schools and the district listserv as well. So we'll keep people posted on dates and times.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we're moving into subcommittee liaison updates. So the finance subcommittee this morning, Tom.
Yeah, so quick update, the Finance Subcommittee discussed FY18 Q2 budget update, as well as an initial view at what FY19 is starting to shape up to look like. For FY18, I think Tony will probably cover this in a future meeting, but the projection currently, as we start to get to the end of Q2, is that we will very likely be in deficit, projected deficit of $200,000 for the year as a result of unanticipated increases in special education out-of-district tuitions predominantly. So I think there'll be an opportunity to discuss sort of how we want to address that and what steps we want to take in future Finance Committee meetings. But just as a heads up, that's the early indication of where we're trending for this fiscal year. And then the FY19 process is really, in some sense, just getting underway, and we're working to get aligned with the town in terms of the broader One Belmont, One budget, and we'll be hitting a number of relatively tight timeframes in the coming weeks to make sure that we are slotted into the kind of town-wide budget process.
Yes.
And part of that was the email that was sent out to the school committee that we will be having our finance meeting next week on Thursday, the 16th? 15th. So it'll be February 15th, Thursday morning at 7:30 a.m. And we encourage, we'll post that as a school committee meeting as well as a finance meeting, so that you can get a good look at what the FY19 draft budget will be. Because after we have that meeting, we will forward that information to the town and Patrice Garvin, our new town administrator, who we've been meeting with along the way regarding town budget and school budget together, and creating that one document that ultimately goes in front of the Board of Selectmen and the Warrant Committee, et cetera. So we encourage the members of the school committee to come next Thursday at 7:30 a.m. to view that. We will then present that publicly at our next school committee meeting in this room on February 27th, which is the next meeting we have as a full school committee on TV.
So the policy subcommittee, I believe, is going to be scheduling a meeting to discuss, as Superintendent Phelan mentioned earlier, after school, and then work related to the task force for exploring starting schools later. We haven't scheduled a meeting yet, but we will when we post it. The curriculum and instruction subcommittee. Do we have any? No. The capital budget committee will be meeting on Thursday, the 8th, this coming Thursday at 8 a.m. to begin the discussions of the capital budget, current projects, and just scheduling our meetings for season. The warrant committee, I don't think there's anybody here who attended any of those meetings recently. I'm not sure if they had any recently either. The Belmont High School Building Committee.
Sure. So we, as outlined earlier, voted to agreed to a 7 through 12 configuration on the January 23rd meeting. At that same meeting, the Belmont High School Building Committee voted for a scheme of 2.4, or the bow tie as it's being named, that we may want to change that name. We are in the next phase of finishing up some of the questions that we have had on our the initial submission of the PDP, and we're getting ready in 2 weeks to put forward the next submission in this phase of work. Every Tuesday, the leadership group of the Belmont High School Building Committee meets for about 2 to 3 hours, so we met today. We're still talking about parking, we're still talking about loops in and out of the school, we're still talking about fields and the orientation of our fields, and making sure that the parking doesn't take away that space, and so there's really a lot of dialogue about that next phase of work that we will go through. And part of that next phase of work that I want this body to think about is that decision within the 7 through 12 school, whether or not 7 through 9 or 7 through 8 is on one side of this building, and 9 through 12 or 10 through 12 is the other, quote, side of this building. We know it's one project, we know it's one school, but as we talk about what's the administrative model, we're also talking about what is the grade configuration within that that building. I am very open to say that the conversations that we've had and the visioning work that we've done and the temperature of the Leadership Council is that 7 through 9 is a model that we feel would really serve children the best as it relates to teaming in small environments for that age group of students and who they are as learners, and a 10 through 12 more department-based model that traditionally to Belmont High's open campus model and how they presently work is how I'm leaning. But I ask you to think about that because that decision will need to be made, and I will make a recommendation on that for the February 27th meeting. The importance behind that decision is not only educational, but it's actually important for the timing of how they're going to continue the work of designing the buildings on the inside. We had a meeting last Thursday night at the Wellington School, and we I stated at that meeting that our next phase of work will really be key for our teachers and educators to be involved in how we organize the classrooms in what we're calling the adjacencies. What should be next to each other? How do we want to organize our departments on the upper school side? How do we want to organize our teams on the lower school side? Where are there great chances for adjacencies, for partnerships between, things like art or robotics and sciences and different teachers to connect with each other? So the layout of the building is really going to be very directly impacted by the feedback we get from teachers. So we're hoping to, I have an email ready to go out to staff tomorrow, and we're meeting with Leadership Council on Thursday around those issues, and we hope to be able to solicit feedback from teachers through principals meetings, through department meetings, through maybe steering committees that we can get folks to serve on, maybe surveys and Google Doc information, so we can get the right questions that we think that the architects want to find out information on, and begin to have that conversation with our staff. That will be a window of time between now and probably the end of March, early into May, where that feedback loop will be continually open to give that advice and feedback to our designers. Because when we think about it in the end, our teachers use the rooms every day. Our teachers are the ones who would like to make the partnerships and know what they think would be the best for how the school should be organized from the inside out. And so that this is where I think the teacher feedback will be essential. And so working with the design team, the meeting agenda today was how do we generate that work plan from the design side, and what do they need us to provide them in terms of opportunity for feedback from the educator side. And we know teachers are very busy during the day, so we're trying to offer a differentiated approach to get involved. Not everybody can go to every meeting, so we want to be able to scaffold and differentiate some of that participation as best we can.
So, asking a possibly dumb but sort of high-level question, I would have thought that, you know, deciding on the grades, upper versus lower, it's not just, you know, like how you design the interior spaces, but the relative sizes of the upper and the lower. I mean, if you decided, for example, to go for 7th and 8th in the lower school and then 9, 10, 11, 12 in the upper school, wouldn't you want to have a smaller lower and then a relatively larger upper?
So yep.
Once we decide on where that split is, doesn't that at some point, you know, limit flexibility in that regard 10, 20, 30 years down the line? Or
so the way that the designers are talking about it right now is that first of all, the split won't be flat, the split will be by floors as well. So there'll be parts of the building that will be team-based or organized in a way that will be up and down floors and on one side of the building or not. And the design architect has been asked to make those sections of each section of the building to be as flexible as possible. So what would happen if in 10 years or 20 years we wanted to go to a house model?
right.
We wanted to have a 9th grade house or a 10th grade house, or we wanted to have 3 houses at the high school that represent grades 8 through 12, 8 through 12. There's other districts that do.
That's quite what British mean by house model, but it doesn't matter.
But there are different options, and we feel that they're going to be able to provide a design that what they call neighborhoods will be flexible in use. So if we are a department-based high school at this point in time, and in 10 years or 15 years, we want to make a team model out of the high school, then there could be flexibility in doing so. If in fact our enrollment went continually higher and higher and we couldn't fit all the students, then maybe 9th grade could be moved over into the high school side and those classrooms could be shifted. So we are creating flexible space that can hopefully be used well over the course of the 50 years of the building, and that's kind of how they're looking at it. But right now we have to start with what we want now and what we think is best for the students we serve, and then they'll provide that flexibility as we move forward.
Janice, did you have? Janice,
I'm sorry.
did you have something you were gonna?
I was just gonna say that if, in terms of flexibility, one of the things we talked about is if you did a 7 and 8, or if we had decided 8 through 12, we wouldn't want to have one grade by itself. So we were thinking that it would be 8, 9 then. And if we said, okay, we think we want 7 through 9 over here and 10 through 12 over here, we still might decide within that so maybe 7, 8 is one model of team, and maybe 9 is a slightly different model. So having it on this side of the building versus that side of the building doesn't, mean that it has to be lockstep identical too. Within some decisions have to be made now because the design team has to move forward with their work, and it doesn't close off avenues that or opportunities to work collaboratively and creatively with the educators to think about, well, what's best for students when we're thinking, at the core of the work we're doing around social emotional learning and making sure all students feel known and valued and loved, and how do we make that quite large school that we'll be building feel small and make sure each child is connected with at least one adult. So lots of work to do, but it's kind of exciting opportunity work that to rethink and reimagine what we're doing, and not just taking what we're doing now and moving it into a fancy new building.
So on behalf of our teachers, we know that there's a lot of nervousness, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of need for clarity. If I'm a 4th grade teacher, what does that mean? If I'm a 7th and 8th grade teacher, if I'm an 11th, if I'm a teacher at the high school and I teach 2 freshman math classes and maybe 3 upper level classes or an AP class, what does that mean for me? We really want to, and in my email we describe that there's certain decisions that we have to make now that we will work through between now and June to support the design of the school. But we have 2 or 3 years to work out these other models, these other decisions that are good for kids that we have to kind of support our teachers through, ask for their feedback on, and get to that point. So that will be our work plan, is how do we organize that work so we can give ourselves permission to focus on certain things now and then actually give ourselves 2 years to prepare for what that model looks like, and then what professional development needs to follow that model. Because we are looking at innovative spaces that we want to provide for teachers. We want collaboration that teachers have been asking for, so we're going to create spaces for that. What interdisciplinary options that teachers have already voiced that they would like to take part in, how do we organize that part of the building and give them PD around doing that work? That doesn't happen because people like to try it. You have to actually support that in advance. So there's a lot of work to do between now and when that school opens. There's a lot of decisions to be made. Some of those decisions will be made by all the feedback given by the professionals. Some of those decisions will be made by the leadership council or by the superintendent and by the building committee or by the school committee. So it depends on what that question is or what those challenges are, but our goal is to get feedback on the things that impact teachers directly, make decisions that are maybe at different levels of this project by different folks, and move the work forward. And that's a work plan that we'll start on Thursday with the leadership council and then work our way through department meetings, building principal meetings, and ask for support through task force for our educators.
Thank you. It's always exciting to hear. The high schools always get new things to report on.
Yes, it's a fast-moving process, and
yes.
And I should say that we want to thank the building committee, Pat Baruch, Bill Lavallo specifically, everybody that serves, from Tom, and the school committee's been involved in a lot of the meetings that we've had that are joint meetings. But there's a lot of people in the community who are working really hard to organize and lead this work. A lot of it is behind the scenes work. We're talking about soil testing, we're talking about traffic, we're talking about how the pond interacts with the school and the 100-year flood plain. And so we just created a subcommittee on systems and zero net energy and ZNE and communication. I mean, there are a lot of different pieces to this work that a lot of folks are working hard on. So the community, I think, is doing a great job of getting the work done, and the open forums, I think, have helped a lot to get people involved.
Is the Energy Committee now involved with this operations subcommittee for the Belmont Building High School?
Which energy committee?
The Belmont Energy Committee.
They posted their first meeting last week, and I don't know who attended or if they invited them. The Belmont Building Committee.
They have a subcommittee on the operations.
Yeah, and so I don't know if they invited the Belmont Energy Committee, folks like Marty Bittner. Is that who you're referring to?
I think he's on the Energy Committee.
Yeah.
I was just thinking because we were reviewing the minutes and he had presented.
I know there are groups that in that Sustainable Belmont arena that are aware of this subcommittee. Like, I think it's not new news to them. I think it's perceived to be a good step forward.
But
so they're not formally involved with the subcommittee?
I do not know the answer to that because I was not at that subcommittee meeting. I'm not on that subcommittee. I can say I do know that at 2 Belmont High School Building Committee meetings, folks from both of those groups have presented to the Belmont High School Building Committee already. And I don't want to make the assumption that they were invited to the initial meeting, but I would like to think that they would be now that focus has been narrowed to that one committee and that one type of work, that they would be involved in that process.
And all the members of that subcommittee are members of the building committee. It hasn't expanded beyond that. So it's a subset of the building committee.
But it's open, they're open meetings.
The open meetings, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
They're posted. Okay. So, community path, I believe we have a report for that. library long-range planning. I believe we have a report for that. So the next agenda item is a vote on disposal of surplus property.
This is the best vote we take all year. This is the really exciting one.
And Tony, you're gonna be presenting?
Sure.
Or-
Steve Mazzola, our Director of Technology, provided a list that's in your packet of items to be disposed of. Just to give some background on the information. Everything on this list now is either not functioning or just isn't compatible with the current up-to-date systems that the technology department uses now. Most of the equipment is in the range of 6 to 10 years old, which is kind of on the older side in terms of technology devices. So items, anything that needed to have been replaced on this item, any items that needed to have been replaced on this list have been replaced over time. So this isn't that we've got a few pages of items and we're just waiting to buy new ones, but we can't because we have to get rid of the old ones. It's not like that. They've been buying things as they need them and subject to funding, and they've just been accumulating the old equipment until they had a big enough batch to bring before the school committee to request for disposal. As you folks may or may not know, the same procurement laws that require us to purchase items at the lowest possible price also require us to either dispose of items at the lowest possible price, or if they have resale value, to get the highest possible price for that. And with the exception of the iPads, the other items on this list basically have no salvage value, and the technology department reaches out to a particular company that acts as a clearinghouse where vendors come in and essentially take them off our hands for free, which is probably the highest and best deal we can get for a lot of this equipment. The exception is the iPads that Steve is soliciting pricing now, whether it be through Apple directly or an Apple reseller. So when he gets that pricing in, he'll review that. I'm certainly available to assist him with that if he needed the help, which I'm sure he doesn't, to get the highest value for that. What else would be important to know? Any device with a removable hard drive, that hard drive is removed so that no student data it leaves the building. And if anything that doesn't have a removable hard drive, that hard drive and that information is erased. So again, all the student and staff data is protected with that. So what we're asking tonight is for the school committee to vote to declare these items as surplus, which then frees up Steve to go ahead and work on disposal in the manner that I mentioned a few moments ago.
We'll just note that it's a 4.5-page list of items,
Yes.
so listing them off all, but just that they're all listed here in Exhibit E, which is part of the record here. So do we have a motion to approve the disposable of surplus equipment listed in Exhibit E?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So next is a vote on the acceptance of donations. These are exhibits F1 and F4.
So we are thankful that throughout the year, we have folks who come to us to support specific projects or parts of our school work and school department work. And then there's folks who come in and leave checks and say, could you just deposit this in the gift account and put it to something that would go to a good cause. And so we're always thankful when folks come in and donate and support our programming, and we always, most always say yes. So we have 4 donations, and it's part of our policy to make sure that you're aware of these donations, and the monies are donated to submitted or deposited in the gift account. And if they're requested to go to a certain function, we put them towards that function. If not, they stay in the gift account. We are thankful to Mr. Robert Mahoney at Belmont Savings Bank, who donated funds for our Belmont Community Education Program, which is part of how those booklets are funded each year. We're thankful to Looters Environmental, who provides funds each year to support the Belmont Public Schools. We're thankful to Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence Verner, who provided support in January to the Belmont Public Schools, and thankful to the Wellington PTO that also made a donation for Chromebooks for the Belmont Public Schools. So we have written thank you notes from the school department and sent them to each one of these donors or their families or to their business, recognizing their donation and thanking them for it on behalf of the Belmont Schools and the Belmont School Committee as well. So thank you to all those folks who support the Belmont Schools.
So, do all these as one
Sure.
motion?
Yep.
To accept the donations listed? We have a motion? Andrea? Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? Okay. So we don't have any personnel items, no business items. The approval of minutes. We have 7 sets of minutes that I was hopeful people looked at ahead of time and we could be as efficient.
Thank you for all your work on the minutes.
And I was hopeful we'd be as efficient as, well, I have a lot of assistants. I just review the minutes and do a few edits that Kathy and Lisa also do the main meat of them. I'm hoping we can be as efficient as the high school building committee and
Never
just
be that efficient.
vote on them and move forward. Do people want to go through them individually or need time to look at them, or?
I need to abstain from one.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess
November 30, I think.
Yeah.
Should we do them individually, since there were, I think, there might be abstentions and other.
I'm listed as present at all of them, and I thought I missed one. January 23rd.
So,
So the only, if you can identify that one, but barring that, Andrea, the only one that does not have everybody here is November 30th, where Kate was absent. So all the other 7 groups of minutes could be voted on by everybody here.
When was the very first the school committee and the Belmont High School Building Committee? That was.
This set.
No, was there one prior to when this set starts?
we have, yes, we've had a couple of sets from the joint meetings already.
Yes, already
that
go
we've
through.
Then I
already-
think,
Yeah.
then I think we're okay.
So all,
All of them since.
all 4 of you could vote on if you wanted to package this, you could vote on the 16th of November, December 7, December 12, January 9, January 16, January 23, and hold out the November 30 vote for a minute because Kate was absent, and then you can do November 30 separate.
Okay.
I just had one on the January 23 minutes. It doesn't, there's nothing of, no mention of any of our discussion before we took the vote. And I didn't know if there was, my recollection was that we had some discussion. I know I certainly voiced the importance of transportation being something
Yes,
that we
and
really needed to
I think
prioritize. I don't recall.
Generally in
necessarily
minutes, we note that there was a discussion. We do not note necessarily the details of the discussion. I don't believe unless it's something that strongly impacts the decision or changes.
Can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
I do believe every member spoke that night, which was helpful. And if there's a friendly amendment that any of the members here would like to make sure that whatever they said was included in the minutes, then you could make that friendly amendment, we could include it in the minutes. As a way of making sure you want to mark any comment that you feel would want to be carried in the minutes. That's just a suggestion from the superintendent.
For me, I feel like it's important to recognize something of what was expressed in our deliberations. it does seem to me in keeping with some
Well,
of the
again, if you want to
presentations.
suggest something now,
Sure.
that's why I sent them out ahead of time and asked people
Yeah,
to
sorry,
know,
I was not
especially a
able to,
major
review
addition
these
like
in
that.
advance to send a response to you. So I would propose something.
And I think I would maybe just add that several committee members expressed opinions on a variety of issues, including transportation, space,
Cost.
And these items were discussed prior to the vote being taken.
Zero net
Discussed
energy.
extensively prior to the vote
Yep.
being taken.
Zero net energy was another comment, if we're gonna list them, and as I recall,
I would just put including but not limited to.
I voiced overall support through 7 through 12 configuration. On the grounds of opportunities for students to interact.
May I make a recommendation, I think, to move the work? So we can pick a point in the order of these paragraphs to say that after the presentation by the superintendent, all school committee members had comments or questions expressed that included but weren't limited to topics of or like transportation, space, net zero, whatever comments people feel, topics that they want to make sure are represented in capturing that night. But in the end, the vote it was a unanimous vote. I think that's actually outlined at the bottom of the voted part. But again, I'm just trying to give it a sentence in a context and then add the topics as we go along. So if there's anything, cost, space, transportation, zero net energy,
And other building-related issues. Building and configuration.
other related building and configuration issues, yeah.
And then after the discussion, upon a motion by Tom, seconded by Murat.
It was voted, yeah. Okay, so that can go right down there?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other edits?
Looks good.
So do we have a motion to approve the minutes from November 16th, December 7th, December 12th, January 9th, January 16th, and January 23rd?
So moved.
And we're moving to approve the minutes of January 23rd as amended.
Yes.
Do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
So the November 30th minutes. Does anyone have any edits or comments on that?
Motion to approve the November 30th, 2017 minutes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
One abstention. So,
Great, that was a lot of work, thank you.
future business, upcoming meetings, February 28th, 2018, the Finance Subcommittee will meet, as well as the school, at 7:30 a.m. The school committee meeting will be held the same day at 7 p.m. here at the middle school. We do have on our agenda that we were gonna move into executive session, but in discussions before the meeting, we've decided that, given there are four of us, and that we will not be moving into executive session. So do we have a motion to adjourn? Okay, second.
Second.